Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well and having a wonderful day. Thank you for being with us today and welcome to another Guest Talks webinar. We've got an exciting discussion lined up that will explore various aspects and address the questions of educational supplies and solutions providers interested in entering the GCC market. We'll be exploring the region's dynamic landscape and uncovering the promising opportunities that lie ahead. Our panel features industry experts and school leaders offering perspectives from both sides. They'll share invaluable insights and highlight key growth areas and emerging trends, providing you with the knowledge to capitalize on this significant potential. You'll hear from them shortly, but first, I'd like to say a big thank you to our official research partner, ISC Research. ISC Research tracks the world's international schools market and is the recognized source of data and intelligence on market developments, trends, and shifts. A few bits of information before we get underway. For all attendees, you can find the control panel on the side. There's a Q&A tab and another one for handouts. And this is where you can find the exclusive report that was produced by IC Research for GESS and our amazing community. You can browse and download these at any time during the webinar. Please feel free to use the Q&A, ask us questions, as the panelists would love to hear your thoughts. And we'll try to address as many of them as possible at the end of the webinar. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our chair and moderator, Rachel Rogers, Head of Sales at ISC Research, to introduce the rest of the panel. Thank you, and over to you, Rachel.
Thanks, Danny, for that warm introduction. Welcome, everybody. For those who haven't met me before, my name is Rachel Rogers. I'm Head of Sales at ISC Research. I've worked in the EdTech sector for over 25 years now, predominantly in the UK market, but have spent the last 5 to 6 years leading teams selling into schools around the world. I'm really pleased to host today's session. I have with me a number of colleagues from across the sector. I'm just going to go around the room for their introductions. So if I start with you, Graham.
Good afternoon. My name's Graham Howell. I'm a school principal of an affordable school in Dubai. We've been open now for 3 years and going into our fourth. We opened with 22 children, now rapidly grown to 1,183 in September. And been in education now for in excess of 25 years, worked across the Middle East, Saudi Arabia as a school principal, and Dubai.
Great. Thanks, Graham. Ian, if I come to you next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ian Hunter. I'm the founder of Lime Education. As is vogue, it seems, I've been in education in one way, shape, or form for over 25 years, but largely in commercial roles, sales and marketing. I founded Lime Education Consulting just over a year ago to help UK edtech companies or education companies generally to grow internationally. And I've been attending GESS for the last probably 8 or 9 years and spent a lot of my time working with schools and companies in the GCC.
Thanks, Ian. And finally, Paul.
Thank you, Rachel. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Montague. I, again, have been in the education sector for 25 years and wore various hats. That's included assistant heads, geography teachers. I've worked for Pearson as a curriculum development manager. I've worked for GL Education as their international consultant across the GCC countries, so I've got specific experience in the region. And I currently work for Edmentum as the international director of partnerships.
That's great. Thanks, everyone. So clearly, as you can see, we managed to get 100 years of experience onto this panel today. So I'm sure there is plenty of knowledge and expertise for us to share. I'm going to start today's session with a short presentation on supplier essentials for the GCC region. This is based on the information that we pulled together for a recent report that ISC produced for GESS, which Danny mentioned earlier, and all attendees at the session today will be able to get a free copy of this report and look into it further. For those of you who don't know ISC Research has been gathering data and intelligence on the international schools market for over 30 years now. We monitor the international schools market closely, looking for shifts, challenges, good practice across the sector, new developments, and of course, emerging opportunities. Data is at the heart of everything we do, and we process close to 200,000 data points every year. So We have a team that spend over 4,500 hours on verification. So you can be sure, and we can be sure, that there's 100% trust in our data. We have a field research team dedicated to interviewing and talking with a breadth of international school leaders to gather reliable data and information that informs our research, such as the report that we'll be looking into today. So without further ado, let's have a look at the international schools market as a whole. It's a really exciting market to work in. And as you can see here, the international schools market has grown substantially over the last 5 years, which includes, of course, 2 very challenging years impacted by COVID-19. The number of schools over this time has increased from 13,190 to 14,457, 10% growth. Number of students now stands at 7.3 million, and tuition fee income for the sector has grown by over 23% in the past 5 years, now worth $64.4 billion. Throughout the extensive challenges of COVID-19, including families leaving countries, salary challenges, restricted access to school facilities and extracurricular provision, the international schools market as a whole maintained its enrolments and in some cases gained as students looked from local schools and private schooling to access higher quality online learning. As a result, investment and development within the international schools market continues. And indeed, ISC research carried out in 2020, we looked into past global crises such as the 2008 financial crash, 2014 oil and gas crisis. And again, this demonstrated how quickly the sector responds from serious setbacks, which is how we continue to see this growth. So let's have a look in more detail at the GCC region specifically. Here we can see 100 new schools have opened, so 6.5% growth within the region now, consisting of 1,650 schools. This is approximately 11% of the world's total international school market. The number of schools, students and staff have all increased slightly under the global growth rate, but the total fee income has increased, is comparable. And now that total part represents 21.5% of the global total. And it's continuing to grow. ISC research are already aware of 57 new schools planning to open in the region, clearly demonstrating the sector continues to blossom. Looking into that region, the UAE has by far the most number of both schools, students and staff. Its most widely offered curriculum is the UK curriculum, offered at 51% of schools in the region, and it's no surprise it's seen as a key market for many suppliers. Saudi Arabia has the second most number of schools, slightly lower annual tuition fee than the UAE. So in Saudi, typical fees would be circa $8,000 compared to $9,500 in the UAE. In Qatar, there's currently 215 schools and a diverse student population. Only a quarter of students are Qatari nationals, with students joining from many other countries, including 13% of students from India and large sectors from the UK, Egypt and the US. In Kuwait, the majority of students are from Kuwait. They make up 55% of the 157,000 students in that region across 136 schools. Bahrain has the fewest number of schools in the region with 69 schools. And again, they are predominantly catering to local students with 63% local students making up that student population. So what is driving growth across the GCC region? The GCC countries have many vision projects along with FDI and infrastructure spending, providing mass number of job opportunities, both for local populations and expatriates moving to the region. This in turn obviously increases wealth, disposable income, and many more families looking for better educational opportunities for their children. So government investment in infrastructure has such a positive knock-on effect to the international schools market. If we have a look at some country examples of what's happening across there, for example, In Qatar, Lusail City is part of the country's 2030 vision plan, costing around $45 billion and is expected to become the next financial district of Qatar. School leaders in the region are expecting this to become the only part of the country they see for future growth of schools in that region. In Saudi Arabia, obviously Saudi's 2030 vision, there's a significant number of substantial development projects across the country, including transformation of Riyadh, NEOM, Red Sea Tourism Project, and the Knowledge Economic City in Medina. In Bahrain, Strategic Projects Plan includes 22 major projects across the country. One of the most notable of these is the construction of 5 offshore cities, which will increase Bahrain's land area by more than 60%. Continued projects also happen across the UAE with major developments across the region. We'll be seeing in 2026, for example, Gordonston School will be opening in Abu Dhabi, and we know Sharjah, from one of their recent consensus, has done a huge amount of planning looking at growth across the region for right away across from housing, nurseries and school requirements in the sector. Wellbeing is another key focal point for schools, aiming to create a nurturing environment that supports all aspects of student development, very much seen in line with the shift to student-centred educational models. It's considered a priority as well for many parents to prepare students for the complex challenges of the modern world. Of course, technology plays a major part of this, whether it's looking at how we manage our well-being with technology in our lives, but also technology supporting well-being management. And many schools are reporting integration of digital platforms that allow for the monitoring of student well-being and offering mental health resources to students. Well-being, of course, is not just for students, they're for teachers too, and 50% of schools are including well-being for teachers in their up-and-coming CPD plans. AI and AR, other key major topics in discussion in education at the moment. Many schools are actively integrating AI into admin tasks to save time for their teachers, although it should be noted that some schools are currently abstaining from this in order to develop robust ethical policies around the use of AI. We are seeing AI making an impact in schools, though. One school group spoke to in Bahrain has developed a bespoke AI system that runs diagnostic tests on students and develops individualised learning plans. They've reportedly increased student attainment by 5% over the last year alone. AR as well is also a focus in schools as they look to make classrooms more streamlined and interactive environments. One school group is heavily investing in VR headsets, for example, so students can engage in a metaverse school environment. And finally, staff retention, definitely a key concern for school leaders. Schools in the region recognise the importance of retainment over recruitment by fostering a supportive work environment. There's an increased emphasis on work-life balance for staff to improve retention. Also, greater focus on developing middle management within schools to open up pathways for staff to develop professionally, with competitive salaries, of course, remaining top of the list for teachers. However, an overall package is still important, including those aspects we spoke earlier around wellbeing and professional development opportunities. So let's have a look at more information on what schools are doing with regards to spend in the region. International schools generally have formal purchasing processes requiring various levels of approval, which differ, of course, depending on the items being purchased. So, for instance, classroom resources, consumable learning materials can often be signed off by the individual needing the resource. But where you've got cost-intensive purchases, so, for example, technology, furniture, science equipment, design tech, they will require a higher level of approval from head of schools or principals. International schools might have differences in their procurement procedures, but they all got implemented guidelines that are clear and transparent for teachers and staff when it comes to procuring resources. Schools determine what they need, so what are their resourcing needs, primarily through assessment of what they've currently got and what are their future requirements, with most schools actively engaging in strategic planning to ensure they meet educational standards and, of course, student needs. Budget planning generally involves many levels of decision maker within a school, so hierarchical yet collaborative approach to resourcing educational supplies. As an example, British School in the UAE explained that when planning their budget, the senior leadership team get together, plan out the budgets for the next academic year with their finance lead before finally getting approval from their board. Other factors to think about and keep in mind and consideration are, of course, inflation and currency devaluation impacting the timeline of setting budgets. So, for example, Egypt has seen a currency decline of 38% in recent times. And as a result of this drastic devaluation, schools are having to renegotiate terms and conditions with suppliers or end up bearing the increased cost of procurement. And of course, this affects their overall budget. Many schools tend to set their budgets annually, with a few doing mid-year reviews, indicating a planning cycle that aligns with academic years. Specific months you can see on the graph here for budget finalisation are predominantly between February to May, indicating purchases in alignment with the new school year's needs. Additionally, procurement orders are placed immediately after the budget is finalised. For instance, most schools, as seen here, place orders in the months of March to May, although some place later in the year, for example, June to August, when they've got more definitive numbers on their student enrolments. Several schools we spoke to across Bahrain, Kuwait and Oman also shared details about their timelines for ordering educational supplies. Physical resources had moved to earlier in the year just due to the delays with customs. So they're having to set their budgets 6 months earlier now to try and avoid any custom delays impacting on new academic years. So something to bear in mind there for some suppliers to the region. Part of the research that we do, we looked and spoke to schools to find out what percentage of their budgets is spent on specific areas. Those areas that we looked at included student materials, books and software. And the graph here shows generally a greater percentage of the budget is allocated to student materials. We can still see significant demand there as well for books and software continuing. So hopefully I've given you an overview of the GCC region here, highlighted some of the opportunities that are available for suppliers looking to work with schools across the sector, and full and further details can be found in the report as mentioned earlier. So now I'd like to bring in our panel with our wealth, over 100 years of experience working across the region, to share some of their knowledge with you. So we looked then across the GCC markets. I think one of the first questions I want to ask is, for education suppliers, what are the key factors that they need to consider when entering this market? And if I come to you first, Paul, on that one.
Perfect. Thank you. First is that the first piece of data we look at when we're looking at which markets we're going to enter is the ISC data. That data set is very, very rich. The market intelligence reports that are produced are fantastic, and it gives us a real idea of where we should be targeting within the GCC. The GCC, as you articulated through your presentation, is completely different from one country to another, and it's really important to take that into consideration. I was lucky enough to have worked for GL Education and now Edmentum, and I approached the countries completely differently working for both of those organizations. And again, it's the ISC data that helps me. I look at, when I was working for GL Education, we were a UK curriculum company and we were looking specifically to target UK schools. So we were using the ISC data to identify which countries have got the greatest volume of UK schools. It also gives us data on things like spend. So it was absolutely fantastic for identifying which markets we should be entering. Okay. Now I'm working for Edmentum and we're looking for US curriculum schools. So I'm targeting a completely different set of countries now to what I was doing previously when I was working with GL education. And it's not just curriculum. The businesses I've operated in have always been content and assessment and online schools. Yeah, but it's not just the curriculum type. It's there's lots of other data in terms of school groups, in terms of fees, in terms of the geography, the spread of schools, that are really, really important from us as a supplier to be able to start thinking and identifying which markets we're going to target and why. If I give you an example, Dubai, we target by ourselves, our own sales force go into Dubai. We go there regularly. We're there once every 2 months. Okay. Whereas Saudi Arabia, we've decided to target in a very different way through a partnership model. I'm sure we'll come back to those two different elements later on.
That's great. Thanks, Paul. You talked quite a bit there about kind of segmentation for the countries that you were approaching. Ian, you work with a wide variety of different suppliers going into the market. Do you find that those factors change from supplier to supplier?
Supplier to supplier and country to country. So it can be quite a complex matrix. I think in terms of just adding to what Paul has said there, once you've established by using the likes of ISE data what markets you're going to target, it's understanding for me what value your solutions are going to add in those countries, because that may be different, or are you adding value at all? So I think it's critical to understand why you're entering the market, not just what markets that you're entering, but also what localization you're going to need for your products, because that will also differ per country. And I guess the other thing on that for me is how you're going to service and support that market, that country that you're entering. It's worth saying that, I think the report backs it up, that these are established markets generally. I think the data says that something like 40% of the products and resources purchased are done internationally. So there is already a market there that's used to being sold to, if you like, internationally. But actually, it's, are you ready? Are you? And that's probably the biggest barrier. There are kind of other factors around market entry, but those are the ones that I think about. Are you adding value? What's the story that you're telling? And adding on to Paul's point, just what are the target markets? Where should you be aiming? But also, how are you going to localize your product, but your and we'll come on to that, I'm sure, but also your products and services to support the market that you're entering.
Absolutely, yeah. Interesting point you picked there on the demonstrating the value. And Graham, from your perspective on the school side of that, is that one of the key factors that you see that suppliers need to be thinking about when they're talking to schools across the region?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I run an affordable school, and so my approach to procurement is somewhat different than maybe my experience in the past. You know, that there is a lot more consideration I have to take on board as a principal now running an affordable school in getting the best value for money, and that's then me working on a much wider scale with our group and seeing if it can influence all of our schools or a number of our British schools, and so working on a much wider scale to try and get greater value for money for us as a school. But it's a serious consideration going forward, that how do affordable schools maintain and continue to procure at an affordable level and then still deliver on curriculum and resources and infrastructure as well. And that is that's tough.
Yeah, that's another challenge to think about, isn't it? Is making sure that you can afford to do what you want to do to deliver, and so being able to hear from suppliers that the value that they get from your solutions must be key. I think, Ian, you touched on a point there around localization. So making sure that those products that you're taking into the market are fit for purpose. Can you expand a little bit more for me on that one, Ian?
Yes, sure. And again, at the risk of repeating myself, it is a differentiation between different countries. But I think in terms of making, if it's content, for instance, making sure that your content is culturally appropriate. I think there is there are certain rules, laws, whatever you want to call them, edicts from the likes of KHDA in Dubai that will prevent you or will insist that your product pass their cultural tests, if you like. And I think in Qatar there are certain, I was in a library in a school in Qatar just earlier this year where, as an example, things like Harry Potter books are not permissible because that isn't culturally appropriate. And so it's understanding what those things are around. So localizing your product is one thing, and I think there's any amount of advice available, but just rocking up and expecting to sell your product into Dubai just because you've sold it into the US or into Asia, you can't make that assumption. You have to understand what those things are. And I think the over the 10, 12 years I've been working internationally, it's amazing how many companies think, well, localization is just language. So is it available in Arabic? Is it available in Mandarin? Well, actually, it's not about that. It's about it is about that to a degree where you're working in those schools where those languages are required. But it's also about your services. I've worked with companies in the past who consider themselves to be international, but their support lines are only available in UK hours. And in countries in the GCC where Sunday is still a day of work, then you have to be able to provide support to that. So it is around changing that, localizing that mindset, as well as just your product as well, and making sure they are culturally aware.
Absolutely. There's a number of factors there, isn't there, for consideration? I know, Paul, you're working for a content provider at the moment. How do you go about looking at that localization of content, given the diversity of the market as well across the region?
Yeah, it's really, really important. It's one of the most important considerations that we have as a company, because if we get that wrong, we'll be excluded from that particular market. So we work very, very closely with the regulators. We work very, very closely with the schools. We work very, very closely with our internal development teams to make sure our internal teams know the protocols, they know the cultural sensitivity, and that we design all of our content so that it aligns to those cultural sensitivity requirements. If I give you an example of what we do in Saudi Arabia, every 3 years, our digital curriculum is evaluated by the curriculum development company, and they ensure that our content is fit for purpose. And that is a rigorous evaluation, looking at each particular element within our courses to make sure that they meet the exacting standards in terms of cultural sensitivity that Saudi Arabia has got, to the extent that we had a gymnast in a leotard in one of our maths programs that had to be removed. Yeah. A lot of our English language texts, when you're looking at literature, they're inappropriate, and there's lots of changes that need to be made there. And we need to think about which texts we're bringing in, embedding into those particular courses. But we work with the regulators. We have our own internal house systems in place that we create the content in the US, but that's created so that it's acceptable in the Middle East as well, and indeed any other location around the world.
Thanks. I know there was always a lot of challenges when we were both at GL, people feeding back, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Questions around snow or cricket or certain things, and thinking about the appropriateness for different markets you're in is key. Graham, how do you, when you're talking to suppliers, how do you know that their solution is fit for purpose? What gives you peace of mind?
I'd like to say I could with great confidence know that they're all fit for purpose, and it's only when you're too far down the line that you realize that there are elements that are inappropriate or not deliverable in terms of the region that we're working in. But I guess my fundamental aim whenever I am looking to procure anything is to build relationships with companies. You know, I will only speak to the one person that I deal with at Pearson, for instance, and I'm not interested in talking to anybody else. And actually having them local in country on a WhatsApp. I need some support with this, and they come into school. You know, it's that personal connection that develops over time, and you know, you go on a journey with a company, and as long as you're prepared to mutually invest, then you know, we work with companies now to make sure or to highlight any areas of concern. You know, I've got a duty to them as much as they've got a duty to me, and so it's building that relationship, and I think that's what we've established over the last 3 years, certainly since our opening, finding key people to work with, and not really moving away from those companies, but going on a journey with them has proven successful for us. But it's finding a wider spectrum of companies who will do that with us, because we're not a big brand, we're not a big name, we're not an outstanding premium school in terms of the buy, and so finding companies who are prepared to work with schools, and I use that work with, not purchase from. You know, there's a difference in the mentality that I'm trying to create with suppliers. It's working with them, but it's not. I haven't got a complete package of suppliers as yet.
And I just want to come back to one of the points you've raised there about having people in region. For you, does that mean them being actually physically based in region, or making sure they regularly visit the region to meet?
Both. I mean, I've got both. I've got people who are based in region. You know, they live, work, and operate from Dubai, and I've got people who visit every 2 months. But I certainly feel that with the suppliers that I regularly use, I am touching base with them probably every 4 to 5 weeks at least. And you know, I've got direct contacts to those people, and equally they've got direct contacts, you know, to me as well. So that kind of relationship is something that we've established over the course of our school, and yeah, every 4 to 5 weeks is when we're really touching base with our suppliers.
I'll just bring in Ian on that, Jan. You're
massively endorse that point.
No,
oh, it shouldn't be. Am I okay? I was just going to massively endorse that point from Graham, actually. And it is one of the key market entry factors, I think, because for me in international sales and marketing, a lot of it's based on networks and relationships and trust, and that's quite hard to build when you're just doing it from the UK or wherever your business is. So you have to be present at some point. But I think being part of a trusted network is if you're a new company to market, how do you do that? How do you build that trust? How do you get into those relationships with the likes of Graham? And it takes time, and we'll talk about that in a bit, I'm sure. But actually, I think I mean, COVID is one of those things that prevented that from happening to a degree, because we lost 18 months, 2 years of travel and building networks and relationships. It is something you could effectively buy in, which is what we do, but it is important. And I think it's worth saying that any amount of emailing and mail shots and calls doesn't necessarily build trust or the relationship. Sorry, I just wanted to add that.
No, some really good key points there. And I think personally as well, for me, during that period of COVID where you couldn't travel to region, it really brought home, once you could get back out, the value of a face-to-face meeting and how important that is for building relationships, building trust, and how it's so much richer than an online meeting, which are great for maintaining that connection on a much more regular basis. Just carrying on with that theme, how can education suppliers effectively collaborate with schools so that they understand what their needs are and develop solutions for them? Paul, do you want to pick up on that point first?
Yeah, absolutely. From my perspective, it's it comes back to what you've all said previously. It's building relationships. It's listening to customers. It's listening to the customer's voice. It's understanding their market. It's understanding their challenges. It's understanding their needs. Now you do that in a number of different ways. And there's no better way than starting that off with face-to-face meetings. I hope Graham thinks the same way. I don't know. We worked together significantly in the past. Okay, and I think we developed a fantastic relationship, which actually started with a challenge in that something wasn't working right in their school, and we helped them. We spent a lot of time working together to get over that challenge, and then it grew and it developed as he transitioned into Saudi Arabia. So it's listening to customers is the most critically important thing. It's getting customer voice back, whether that's testimony, whether that's through case studies, whether it's through using webinars. I'm very, very fortunate, and I speak to educators around the world on a daily basis, and I learn from every single conversation that I have. There is something new that I apply to my role or the way I'm strategically targeting a certain country or a group of schools or a space because of what I learn from those conversations. Our marketing department, they do outreach and they try and talk to customers, but equally they want to talk to people who aren't working with us currently, who aren't our customers already. I have a network of head teachers and now partners, if you like, around the GCC, but also around the world that I will connect with on a monthly basis to get detailed market sort of intelligence on local challenges that they're experiencing. I get ideas about what that market needs. We get ideas about what the economy in that area needs. So we then get to understand what we need to do and what we need to provide that's going to help that market grow. Does that make sense?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. And I think I just want to come back onto one of the points that Ian touched on just previously. You were saying, Ian, that, you know, building of those relationships is not a quick win. I think, as you were saying there, Paul, with lots of different touch points. And how long or what's the realistic approach that Supplier should think about, Ian, when going into potentially new markets or this region?
That's a good question. I'm not sure there's a definitive answer for it, because actually, if you can build relationships quite quickly, and you have a product that's solving a real problem, if there's a challenge in a school that you are resolving, then you can still turn a sale around quickly. It's not, you don't have to establish all the networks or all the trust before you start selling, but actually if you can leverage off those early sales and build that network and trust. I think anybody who kind of turns up at a conference once and expects to sell immediately afterwards in great numbers, I don't think you can do that. I think you've got to invest in an area for 12 months, say. It's arbitrary, it's an arbitrary number, but unless you're doing that, you won't build your network, you won't build your relationship. Just gonna, if I may, come back to one of the questions that's been asked. No, I'm not saying you need somebody permanently in region. That's not the case at all. I think you need somebody, I think you need a presence. Now that can be done virtually, or by attending events, or working with some of the membership groups, or things like that. I think there are many ways in which you can be successful there. As I said, you can be successful immediately, but you will need your relationships, your network, to grow that out from a small start. Does that make sense?
It does indeed. Thanks for that, both. Graham, is there a difference between building those relationships with a single school and a group of schools? Because obviously you're part of a much larger organisation at the moment, and I know you've worked in that.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I try and sort of, as a principal of my school, try and lead the way in where I think my school will be going and the direction that's taking, and then also how that will impact all of our other British schools. So I'm trying to put us in a position where we are the flagship school in terms of where we're leading. And then when it comes to sort of the negotiations and the further discussions, I'm looking at it then from a group perspective to try and sort of get as much value for money as possible. But just picking up on Paul's point, Paul and I, we've got a history together spanning over well over a decade, working closely in different countries. But it's about an authenticity, and I struggle when retailers or people come in, they visit my school and they're on a time limit, and they want to see 8 schools in a day, and I'm number 2, and they want to be in and out and secure a deal, and that's, for me, there is a lack of authenticity in the relationship. And I think that relationships, as Ian and Paul have both mentioned, there's a depth that needs to go into, there's a work that needs to go into those relationships to build that authenticity, to build a genuine connection. And for me, it's about whoever's coming into our school, make sure they do understand our school. They understand not just the context of the region, but they understand my school and my staff and my needs. And that takes time, but one that Paul and I have been successful over the last decade in securing. But it's working at a group level has bigger advantages. I've got bigger chips to bargain with than if I'm just looking at what was a very small school. We're talking about 22 children or 80 children and 200 children, and now we're looking at over 1,000. I've got a bit more bargaining power. But when I'm talking about 25,000 children, or if I'm talking about 9 British schools, then people start to be even more interested in working with us.
There's one bit, Rachel, I'd like to add to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Our customer services team are vitally important for us, because not only do I see through I always try and see through the eyes of Graham or whichever principal I'm talking to, so I get their perspective and I understand their perspective, I understand their aims, their goals, what they're trying to achieve, and then we try and develop a bespoke solution from a teaching and learning perspective that will help them do that. But our customer service team, they work then continuously throughout the year with our individual schools, co-creating a plan that helps them achieve their aims and their goals and their ambitions. And we work collectively together and hold each other to account if we're not supporting each other in the right way. And that has a massive, massive impact on developing relationships moving forward. It really does.
Yeah, I think you both pick up on some great points there, and I love the use of the word authenticity, Graham. I think it's so important in this sector, because you both mentioned earlier, talking about it, Paul, you were working with Graham, helping him to address a challenge and an issue, and it is sometimes about getting together and problem solving for the greater good of student outcomes and improvements in teaching and learning. And I think that's key, isn't it, to really drive the sector forward. Just carrying on that theme, what kind of future trends do you foresee in the K-12 education sector across this region that suppliers should be preparing for? What are those current challenges and pain points? And can I come to you first on this, Graham?
You've picked up on wellbeing, and we get assessed in Dubai on the quality of wellbeing, and it's sometimes you can't procure it. It's about an infrastructural approach to how you manage students, but equally also how you manage staff, and it's where it's trying to understand where that's going. And I am fully aware and transparent about who we are as a school, and related to that our salary packages aren't the most significant in the area. Fully aware of that. However, that said, all of our primary school teachers are British, native, Irish speaking. So we are doing something that other schools aren't doing. But in terms of wellbeing, I know that we can't pay more than we are paying, but we can do other things to support them. So they want to go to son or daughter's assembly, or deliveries to school, using school transportation, using school facilities management people to support with moving. We try and look at a wider sector, and as a dad and as a husband, there are points in my year where I just need to do something for my children at their school. And so having that level of flexibility isn't something it's not something we buy, but it's something we buy into as a school. And we all accept that there are times when there's an emergency day, or there are times when there is a school assembly or a graduation, and we give that time to our staff as often as we can physically, to support that well-being. We've always said that there are no emails after 5 o'clock. There are no weekend emails. I have only in the last week just contacted my SLT. I've tried to give them the whole of July, and we're meeting actually after this today in preparation for next week. But it's recognizing that people have got a life as well, and well-being is critical to the happiness of our school. If we can't look after our staff, they're not going to look after our children, and therefore our school isn't going to be where I want it to be. So it's a big driving force, but I'm not in a position yet to try and predict what that's going to cost us. There are lots of wellbeing platforms and answering questions, and actually we've put in a wellbeing lesson for children this year, but as a non-device driven school, well-being is about the connections with people, and so our well-being lessons are focused around interactions rather than sitting in front of a computer screen. And so it's understanding where that's going and how much further we have to or want to take it as a school.
Interesting. Yeah, so much. It's all so interconnected, isn't it? That well-being, the systems, the solutions, trying to think through all of that. What are the kind of trends that you're seeing, Ian? Because obviously you're working with a number of suppliers looking to get into the region. Are there any kind of key solutions that are going
there? I'd echo again what Graham said. One of the companies that I'm working with is focused on pupil well-being, and so it's becoming much more of a requirement. The KHD inspection around well-being is one of those drivers, but also clearly the need to focus on pupil well-being. So that is something that we're seeing in one of the companies I work with a great deal of traction. Particularly in the UAE at the moment and in Qatar. So well-being would be one of those things. I think there's a growing trend that I'm seeing for schools to appoint a head of AI or a director of AI, so that they're making informed decisions where AI will make a difference rather than be AI for the sake of AI. And I think that's really important, that we start to, is it solving a problem? Is it making something easier? Is it saving money? All of those sorts of things. But I think that role becomes increasingly important, with the kind of other kind of developing the area of adaptive and personalized learning. I think it's using AI around that is certainly where we see things going. I work with couple of companies around teacher training, teacher development, teacher qualifications, and to echo Graham's point again about happy staff, keeping your staff happy and content, but also developing. So I think that's does technology have a role to play in teacher qualifications? I think that is the case, and it's been around a while, but technology addressing STEM, I think that's probably here now, but it's a continuing area of development, I think.
Thanks, Ian. Was that STEM you said at the end then? Yeah. Just checking I've got another question coming on in a moment, but anything further from you, Paul, to add into that?
Yeah, I think my philosophy has always been with education that we start from the student and what we want their outcomes to be. And we want every student to reach their potential, exceed their potential if they can. Yeah. But we need to factor that in with all the different stakeholders. We need to look at what the World Economic Forum, what the OECD is saying are going to be important, what McKinsey reports are going to be saying is important for them in the future. And we therefore need to create a curriculum that is appropriate to the needs of these children in the future. We know the future is going to be learn, unlearn, relearn. You're going to be reskilling as you go along. We know that in the GCC, they're creating knowledge economies because they're moving away from a dependency on oil. So they want to be at the head of STEM, artificial intelligence. Dubai has got an artificial intelligence 2030 plan. They've got a 2071 centennial plan about being the best country in the world. Yeah. So whenever we look at the future, we look at what these think tanks, the World Economic Forum, are suggesting in terms of what's required from the curriculum. What are the skills that students are going to need in the future? We look at this and then we try and re-engineer and work backwards from there as we're working with our students. Now, Ian talked about personalizing learning. Absolutely. Technology advancements are going to enable that to be absolutely superb in the future. Exact Path, one of our solutions, does it brilliantly now. Okay. We look at personalizing the curriculum as well. We have an online school. We work with schools around the world. If they haven't got a teacher who can teach science, we'll teach a lesson of science. If they haven't got somebody who can teach artificial intelligence, they can use our teacher to teach artificial intelligence. So we've become an extension of a school, enabling them to personalize learning and personalize curriculum as much as possible. I'm a dad as well, and I look at, in the UK, the curriculum that my daughter is following, and I'm horrified by it. She is learning none of the skills that she needs for the future. There's no leadership, there's no teamwork, there's no innovation, there's no entrepreneurship, there's no social and emotional learning skills. And I think those things are critically important in the future as well. Sorry, Rach, you asked me, you need to give me a timer.
No, I was going to say, those skills that you just touched on there, I think, when I speak to a lot of the schools, and what's great about international schools is, compared to obviously my children at UK schools, is, that freedom to be quite innovative. And there's some fantastic work going on in international schools. And for me, with that long history of working in them, it feels like it's such an exciting, innovative time and moving forward. We've got some really fantastic questions coming from the session today. So I want to just touch on some of these, linking in and actually following on from what we were just saying then around personalised learning. And one of the things that I always think about, again, just, one of my youngest is dyslexic, and how do we personalise and support them in their learning journeys? And one of the first questions that's coming is actually about, could we share more details around SEN provision across GCC? Can I come to you, Graham, for that first, and just find out more about how SEN is approached in your school?
Yeah, it is a focus, with the Dubai Schools inclusivity policy, where no child is to be precluded from schools. I've got 2 autistic children, both who study in Dubai, so I'm fully aware of what schools offer. But there's still an awful lot of work to do. We, as a school, I rebranded SEND because for the nature of the families that we have, they don't necessarily recognise or understand the context of SEND, and so we rebranded to Pathfinders. And when I opened the school, Pathfinders is a department for all children. It's not just for those who have got a particular need or greater need. It's for all children. So every child in our school, all 1,183, they are in Pathfinders, and we have Pathfinder leaders, and those Pathfinder leaders basically plot the routes to success. Now, some of the routes to success might be down the Emirates Road doing 120 kilometers, and others might be a more meandering path. But we now are able to identify routes to success for each of our individual children, and that's become a really powerful metaphor, a powerful use of language. We have route maps, we have Pathfinder leaders, we have a pathfinding team, and that rebranding has been really powerful. But we have increased our SEND team this year to include therapists. We've got behaviour therapists, we've got speech therapists this year, we've got counsellors, and you're bearing in mind that run a school from FS1 to year 9 at the moment until we continue to grow into up to year 13. But we've got student school counsellors, behaviour therapists, speech therapists, SEND teachers, EAL 99% of my 99% of my children English as a second, third, or fourth language. 105 children who can't speak a single word of English, and so that those provisions are a real challenge. But that's life, and that's the nature of schools now. That it's not going to be as easy as it maybe was 15 years ago. There are a greater number of challenges. There's a greater diversity in a school of what we were when we closed, 850 children with 56 nationalities. And that brings in itself, that brings a number of challenges. But yeah, our SEND team is no longer just about providing additional support for teaching. It much more diversity in our team now than there ever has been in any of my schools, I would say.
It's great to see that sheer extension of that, and really the equity coming through and the personalisation in that. And everybody's always on their own. You're on your own personal journey through life, aren't you? So it's great that kids have that coming through their education. Does that link with what the work that you do, Paul? Obviously, with the personalised pathways.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think that the biggest difficulty is that SEN is a very, very generic term, that when you get into each and every single student, they've all got very, very different needs, and they all need a completely different outcome, which is what Graham and his school are doing so effectively with the provision that they're providing. Yeah, we have got personalized learning solutions, but they're personalized by their attainment in certain subjects, what they do and what they don't know, and they will then get given the right lesson at the right time, at the right level that they need to progress. So from an English language learning perspective, if they're learning English as a foreign language, then this has phenomenal growth and success, because it's not teaching them, it's not giving them the content they need if they're in grade 4, it's giving the content that individual student needs who's in grade 2 on that particular skill that they don't understand. Our online school mirrors a lot of what Graham has been talking about as well. There's individual action plans for each and every individual student that works with us. And depending upon their need, obviously, it will be different provision. Albeit we do it through an online environment, which is more difficult than if you're face-to-face to facilitate.
Thanks, Paul. Do you want to add anything into that, Ian?
No, I don't think so. I think both of that, it's been answered pretty thoroughly there.
Yeah, there's quite a lot in the Q&A. So one of the next questions there is from Akil, keen to understand more about the Saudi market in particular. Anybody want to pick that one up?
Well, I could pick up a little bit if you want, and I'll hand over to Ian. I've spent probably 6 years trying to penetrate the Saudi market. Very, very, I'd say start with successfully, then unsuccessfully, and we're now getting there again. It's a very, very different market to the UAE, and that's the first thing that people need to understand. It's completely different. The volume of expat teachers' experience in teaching that's in the UAE is not replicated in Saudi Arabia. We're talking the UAE has got 88.8% expats there. Saudi is probably completely the opposite direction, and therefore that has a significant impact on how you want to penetrate and grow in Saudi. We know that in the future Saudi is going to want a partner model, that you're going to have an office there. I have literally spent, as I said, 6 years interviewing every possible partner that I've ever thought we could ever want to work with. Okay. And for some reason or another, they didn't necessarily work, and there were issues. They were, for me, where Edmentum and McGraw-Hill is a competition, so they had McGraw-Hill with them already, or there were lots and lots of issues. They didn't understand the teaching and learning element. They didn't understand our product. They wouldn't be able to articulate our digital solutions because they were used to selling textbooks in some way. We've never been able to find one. I'm delighted to say in the last month or two, we found an absolutely perfect partner in Saudi Arabia that we're delighted to be working with, which is Knowledge Tower, and that they are absolutely fabulous. They are our perfect partner for Saudi Arabia, but it's certainly is one of the most difficult markets in the GCC to crack, but it's one of the most important ones to get a handle on because of Vision 2030, because of their growth projections, what's going to be coming, what's happening, their changes. But it's more difficult. If you look at the UAE, the inspection framework, love it or hate it, ties an owner into spending money to improve the quality of teaching and learning. So there's an opportunity for us as selling educational solutions, because they need to buy, to help them improve, because that's index linked basically to the fees that they can charge. There's nothing like that in Saudi Arabia. So you're having a very, very business orientated conversation, and it's how is spending more money on your solution going to help me gain more money, because they're happy with the quality of the education they're already providing. Very, very different markets. Sorry.
What else to add? I think Saudi is going to be huge. Clearly, it's the next big market that everybody's going to be looking at. What I would caution is that whether it's going to be that huge as quickly as people are saying it's going to be, and therefore I think it requires a proportionate effort at the stage of its development that it is. I remember people back in the day talking about Vietnam going to become a huge market in the next 12 months. It actually took about 3 or 4 years. I think for me, there is a lot of effort going in from the likes of GESS, Beck, people like that, but also from the British government, from the Department for Business and Trade. And I think being aligned with some of these things helps you establish who the key stakeholders are, who the decision makers are, so that actually you can not burn time, energy, and money chasing things that aren't going to happen. I think there are some key stakeholders already surfaced. If you're going to GESS in Dubai later this year, then there will be a significant presence from the Saudi Arabian Ministry of Education. I think it's about small steps and finding the key stakeholders, but also being clear about what problem you're trying to solve. I work with some schools over there now around teacher training. And when I say that, it's about qualifying teachers, because actually one of the risks I think ahead for the rest of the region is that Saudi takes an awful lot of the current teacher population. So they're currently focused on how they're going to train their teachers or train their people to be able to teach in schools. So I think it's those sorts of areas now where the schools are starting to be built and they're attracting students that we need to look at. I think it's being, trying to sell an endpoint solution at this point is probably a bit early, when some of the new schools have got offices that are porta cabins and just aren't ready yet. So it's timing. I think the proportionate response between the effort and the time it's going to take to see a return, but it's going to be huge.
Thanks both. I'm just conscious of the time. I'm just going to take one more question from the Q&A, and then we will come back. I'll respond to people that have placed questions. We'll follow up with them after the session today. One of the questions in there is around working with associations. We talked earlier about groups, but saying that associations sees value for marketing for a school, but is there really a benefit to suppliers working with associations? Can I ask you, Graham, first from a school's perspective, that difference for you in terms of obviously what you get from association as a school, but do you see that those suppliers working with associations, do you see it as a kind of quality control option? And
I think it would give us some reassurance if there was an external party authoring almost the quality that was being offered by particular companies. I think we would, as a school and as a group, would be more reassured about moving to the next stages of conversations or the next stage of the process. So, yeah, it's something that I think would be beneficial. How that can actually happen, I'm not in that sector and wouldn't really know. But I certainly, in terms of my role, would be more confident if I mean, I go on recommendation from other schools or from other principals, but if there was a central group authoring companies for particular services or for particular products, then I think that, centralizing that would be a beneficial approach for us as a school.
Yeah, I think associations are key for, it's another kind of small community, isn't it, within the sector, and that recommendation, word of mouth, is vital. Ian, I know you do loads of work with associations for a number of companies. Is there anything further you would add to that?
Just from a supplier, saying this because I've seen a question from Nalini in the chat, but if you're aligned with BSME, then I think it does give a tick, or a kind of a confidence to a school that you're recognized by organizations like that, because they have a quality control about who they allow to attend their conferences and take part in what they do. And there are others, the likes of COVIS, who have a number of schools in the region, ALBSO. I think it's important that you are aligned, and that, again, it's a way of kind of short-circuiting some of that network, the network challenge. How do you build your network? Well, you're more likely to be able to do it where there's a collection of 120, 130 schools than doing it school by school by school by school. And so I think that sort of alignment with both the associations and some of the events, and let's face it, you could turn up at an event every week, working out what the right events are and the right associations to be part of. I think that is critically important.
Absolutely. And I'm going to finish actually on Nalini's question. I'm going to pose a challenge to you all on the panel here. I'm going to put Nalini's question to you, but I'm going to challenge you to answer it in a kind of 1 or 2 word answer. So question being, what would you say is the single most needed focus or solution that Middle East schools should start exploring that perhaps isn't yet on their radar? Anybody want to take that one first?
I'll say something, but I don't think it's not on people's radar. But I think the teacher shortage crisis is one of the biggest ticking time bombs globally that there is. And I think the focus on teaching local people to be teachers in schools, notwithstanding the challenges that parents present to schools on the types of teachers they want to see. But I think finding a way of solving that challenge is going to be one of the most important things. The international school market continues to grow. The traditional feeds into that international teaching profession, like the UK, are struggling to get teachers themselves. So I think it's on people's radar, but I think it's something, and well-being will be part of that and all those other things, but it's something that's not 2 words, is it? Sorry, but that's a challenge. I beg your pardon.
You must have misheard me and thought 2 minutes in.
Sorry.
No, that's great. Thank you. Paul?
I think I come back to personalised learning. And again, this isn't new. It's on everybody's radar. But solutions that combine assessment and content together to create personalised learning paths of content for each and every individual student, I think those are critically important. And personalising curriculum as well. Again, that's not 2 words. I do apologise.
Thanks, Paul. And Graham, most importantly, direct from school. What are the key?
I'm going to extend on Ian's description, and I'm going to go staff retention. Rather than getting people in, it's trying to keep them, and that's really tough.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we could have gone on all afternoon. I'm very conscious that it's nearly 2:10. Can I just say thank you so much to everybody who joined me on the panel today? And I'll hand you back to Danny.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Rachel, Paul, Graham, and Ian, who's actually celebrating his birthday here with us today. So happy birthday, Ian. That was very informative, everyone, and thank you for the valuable insights that you provided us and the audience with. I'm conscious that we unfortunately couldn't get to all the questions that were asked, but we'll share them with you via email after the webinar and try to get back to those who asked them. And if anyone from the audience has any further questions or would like to connect with our speakers or perhaps find out more about GESS Dubai, which takes place from the 12th to the 14th of November, our team would be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have and assist. So please feel free to send an email to sales@guesseducation.com. And if you haven't found them already, there are some handouts pertaining to the show in the handouts section that you can download. You'll also be redirected to a short survey once we end the webinar. So please tell us what you thought and if there are any topics you'd like to hear about. Thank you again to our official research partner, ISC Research, and Rachel in particular. If you want to enjoy the webinar all over again, you can do so, as we'll be uploading it to our YouTube channel and sending it out to all attendees by email. A massive thank you to our panel and also you, our audience, for tuning in. If you haven't already, please make sure you're subscribed to our newsletter. Follow us on social media and visit guesseducation.com to stay informed of our latest events, both in person and webinars. Thank you all once again, and until next time, please take care and have a great day.